Hi, everyone. Welcome to Criminal Cases Today. In today's video, we'll explore a case that will take your breath away, the murder of Larry Fenton by his wife, Rebecca Fenton. In a shocking act, Rebecca was accused of planning and executing the murder of her husband, Larry. What seemed like an ordinary life ended up turning into a nightmare of betrayal and crime. Get ready to unravel every detail of this dark plot and learn the twists and turns that mark this case. Stay with us and follow closely the story that reveals the darkest secrets behind the lives of Rebecca and Larry Fenton. Let's go. It was a typical Sunday in Clearwater, Florida, on February 3, 2008. The sun was shining in the blue sky, reflecting the pleasant weather in the city, where many residents were enjoying the weekend. But, that day, there was an extra excitement in the air. It was the day of the Super Bowl, the most anticipated event of the year for American football fans. The streets were quieter, as most people preferred to stay home or gather with friends to watch the big game. Larry Fenton, 57, was one of those football enthusiasts. Larry lived a quiet life with his wife, Rebecca, in a beautiful home in a residential neighborhood in Clearwater. He had planned that Sunday, like many other Americans, to watch the Super Bowl comfortably at home. Larry, a robust-looking man but with signs of fatigue from life, was excited for the game, but before it started, he decided to take a short nap to prepare himself for the marathon of emotions that would come. Rebecca Fenton, on the other hand, was a 41-year-old woman who was passionate about fitness and bodybuilding. Every day, religiously, she dedicated hours to the gym they had built in their own home. The gym was Rebecca's pride and joy, a place equipped with all the equipment necessary to maintain her impeccable physical shape. That afternoon, while Larry was relaxing, Rebecca was at the gym, lost in her exercises, focused on each repetition, feeling her muscles burn as sweat ran down her face. After more than an hour of intense training, Rebecca decided it was time to go back inside. She imagined that Larry would already be awake, probably with the TV on, ready to watch the game and, who knows, already thinking about ordering the pizza that always accompanied sporting events. When she entered the house, Rebecca called for Larry, but there was no answer. The silence was strange. She walked through the rooms of the house, and as she approached the entrance hall, she was overcome by a shiver. There was Larry, lying on the floor, motionless, in a red puddle that spread across the floor. Shock took over Rebecca. Her eyes widened, and her heart raced. That red liquid staining the floor was blood. Rebecca ran to him, kneeling beside Larry's body. With shaking hands, she tried to feel for a pulse, but everything seemed to blur in her mind. Larry's eyes were open, fixed on a random spot, and for a moment, Rebecca almost allowed herself to believe that he was still alive. But then the terrible truth quickly set in. Larry was dead. What had happened? The house was in chaos. Cabinets and drawers were open, with belongings scattered everywhere, as if a hurricane had passed through. Rebecca ran upstairs, checking every room, but the scene was the same. Everything was turned upside down. Desperate, she went back downstairs and, not knowing what else to do, ran out of the house, grabbed the phone, and called 911. When the police arrived, the scene they found was disturbing. Larry Fenton, who just hours before had been alive, full of anticipation for an afternoon of fun, now lay lifeless at the foot of the stairs. He had been shot 4 times, in the back, in the arm, and in the neck. The brutality of the shots, fired at close range, made it clear that this was no accident. Someone wanted Larry dead. At first, the scene seemed clear to the police, a robbery gone horribly wrong. Larry's Jeep was missing, and the house was completely ransacked. It was as if someone had broken in, rummaged through the house looking for valuables, and then quickly fled. But as the investigators began to look closer, things didn't add up. Upon closer inspection, the detectives realized that although the house was in disarray, nothing of value was missing. Larry's wallet, full of cash, was untouched. Jewelry and other expensive items were still in place. That was the first warning sign. Who would break into a house, cause such a ruckus, and then leave without taking anything but the Jeep? Larry's wife, Rebecca, said she was in her home gym when it happened. She had gone out to work out, as she did every day. When she returned, around 4:30 or 5 p.m., she found Larry lying in the hallway. Rebecca said she checked Larry's pulse twice, desperately trying to find any sign of life. But that didn't make sense to the police. When they examined the scene, they noticed that the pool of blood around Larry was intact, with no footprints or any sign that it had been disturbed. If Rebecca had actually knelt down next to her husband to check for a pulse, there would have been marks. But there were none. Larry's body appeared to be in the exact position it had fallen. Coroners confirmed that Larry had been shot 4 times, in the neck and back. The shots were fired at close range, suggesting that the shooter was very close to Larry when he pulled the trigger. After being hit, Larry fell to the ground and, according to the evidence, did not move. The police then began to wonder, if he hadn't moved, how could Rebecca have touched him without leaving a mark? The investigation, which initially seemed straightforward, began to get complicated. What was supposed to be a robbery case soon began to raise suspicions of something more sinister. The house was ransacked, with drawers open and belongings strewn across the floor. But apart from the Jeep, nothing significant was missing. It was almost as if the scene had been staged to look like a robbery. But by who? As detectives and forensic experts examined the house, trying to find any clues that would shed light on what really happened, an incident outside caught their attention. Rebecca, who must have been devastated after finding her husband dead, was seen laughing and joking with the officers. This reaction, which was captured on video, seemed extremely out of place. How could someone who had just experienced such a huge tragedy be smiling? This strange behavior immediately raised suspicions. The police began to wonder if Rebecca was hiding something. After all, why would a burglar choose to break into a house on Super Bowl Sunday, when most everyone is home watching the game? Both cars were in the driveway, indicating that both Rebecca and Larry would be home. Breaking into a house at a time like that seemed like an odd choice for a burglar. When images of Rebecca laughing were shown on the local news, suspicions about her only grew. She tried to justify her reaction by saying that she was responding to a joke made by a police officer, but investigators didn't buy that explanation. They assured her that none of the officers would have made jokes in such a serious situation, especially with Larry's body still inside the house. Rebecca also mentioned that she might have been in shock, a common response to trauma, but detectives weren't convinced. There were other things that didn't make sense. When she found Larry lying on the floor, why didn't she try to help him? Most people would have tried anything to save their loved one, call for help, try to stop the bleeding, something. But Rebecca ran through the house, without immediately providing aid to her husband. If you find this case as intriguing as I do, don't forget to like the video. Your support is essential to keep us bringing you these fascinating and important stories. Click the like button and help the channel grow, it motivates us to bring you more content. Continuing. When Rebecca found Larry lying on the floor in a pool of blood, the scene was one of pure despair. But instead of running to help her husband, she thought, could it have been robbers who did this? This thought, so unusual, left the detectives perplexed. Imagine the situation, you enter your house and see someone you love, injured, on the floor. Wouldn't your first instinct be to run to help him or her, to call for help immediately? But Rebecca, instead, started thinking about robbers and how she should get out of the house. This reaction caught the attention of the police. For them, if you really love someone, the last thing on your mind would be thinking about a robbery. Your focus would be on trying to save that person, doing everything you could to help them. However, Rebecca explained that she was afraid that whoever had attacked Larry was still in the house. She said that, at that moment, her instinct for self-preservation took over and all she could think about was getting out of there as quickly as possible. Rebecca also said that when she found Larry's body, she took his pulse, not once, but twice. The first time was when she found him, and the second time was before she ran out of the house. But this story raised even more suspicions among the detectives. They noticed that the pool of blood around Larry was completely untouched, with no footprints or signs that anyone had approached him. If Rebecca had actually touched him, she would have left marks, but there was nothing. How could she have taken Larry's pulse without getting blood on her hands? The detectives began to think that Rebecca had known all along that Larry was already dead. They believed that she had shot him herself and that was why she had not bothered to actually check his pulse. But Rebecca insisted that she had taken his pulse at his neck, avoiding touching his bloody wrists. She explained that she had watched a lot of crime shows on TV and knew that at a crime scene, it was best not to touch anything. So she said she didn't try to actively help her husband. But the detectives weren't convinced. Something about Rebecca's story didn't make sense to them. Her 911 call also raised questions. During the call, Rebecca seemed more concerned with establishing an alibi than asking for real help. She repeatedly said she was at the gym at the time of the crime, as if she wanted the police to believe she had nothing to do with what happened. To the detectives, this insistence sounded forced, as if Rebecca was trying to cover something up. Despite all these suspicions, the police still didn't have any concrete evidence to charge her with anything. They kept investigating, asking Rebecca if she knew why someone would want to hurt Larry. But Rebecca said she had no idea. Meanwhile, the detectives decided to take a closer look at Larry and Rebecca's personal lives. They wanted to see if there was anything wrong in their marriage that could explain what happened. Rebecca had always described her marriage as a fairy tale, saying that Larry was her Prince Charming, that everything was perfect between them. But Sergeant Carr Spinn, who was leading the case, had her doubts. She knew that no matter how beautiful a marriage may look on the outside, no relationship is perfect. And sometimes the most serious problems are precisely those that no one sees. Larry had never told anyone about the problems in his marriage, which made the detective's job very difficult. Rebecca said that they were very private, that they didn't like to share their personal lives with others. But as the investigation progressed, the detectives discovered a shocking secret from Rebecca's past. For 7 years, she worked as a high-class call girl. And, on one occasion, she was even arrested for doing so. When confronted, Rebecca confirmed the story, but was quick to say that this did not mean that she was capable of taking someone's life. For Rebecca, working as a call girl was a way to live an exciting, glamorous life. She enjoyed the easy money, the expensive restaurants, the trips to exotic places, the influential people she met. But even with that past, she insisted that it had nothing to do with what happened to Larry. She tried to convince the detectives that one thing had nothing to do with the other. But to the detectives, the timing was suspicious. Had Larry just discovered this secret about Rebecca's past? Could it have led to a fight that ended tragically? Rebecca was adamant that her past as a call girl was no secret to Larry. She explained that they had discussed the subject before they had even discussed marriage. At the time, Larry had asked her if there was anything about that life that still appealed to her. Rebecca had said no, and with that, the subject was closed. They never mentioned it again. However, the investigators were far from believing that the story ended there. They began to dig deeper into Rebecca and Larry's lives and discovered that, in fact, the couple was going through difficulties. Rebecca, who had previously led an active and interesting life, had become a bored housewife in Clearwater. The drastic change in her life piqued the detectives' curiosity. As they investigated further, the detectives found a new piece of the puzzle. Rebecca was interested in a younger man named David. David was a chef at a local restaurant, and Rebecca seemed to have a crush on him. But the question was whether this interest was merely platonic or if there was something deeper going on. Although there was no concrete evidence that Rebecca and David had an intimate relationship, Sergeant Spinlin, who was leading the investigation, learned that the couple had a secret meeting place. Both Rebecca and David denied any romantic involvement. David claimed that Rebecca was just an attractive friend and that nothing had happened between them. Rebecca confirmed that David was a close friend who she found attractive, but insisted that she had not had an intimate relationship with him. Detectives began to formulate a theory: what if Larry had found out about Rebecca's interest in David? This could have led to an explosive argument and possibly a fight that ended in tragedy. Perhaps Rebecca, desperate and out of control, had taken Larry's life. This theory became more plausible to investigators when they noticed that Rebecca seemed eager to establish an alibi. During the 911 call, Rebecca repeatedly repeated that she was at the gym, as if she were trying to convince the officers of her innocence. Her insistence seemed forced, as if she were trying to cover something up. The investigation continued, and detectives began to find more concrete evidence. 2 days after the murder, they found Larry's Jeep Cherokee abandoned just a block from his home. Inside the vehicle, they found only a few pieces of jewelry, a jar of change, Larry's iPod, and his laptop. What was missing from the car raised more suspicions. Why would a thief leave valuable items behind? After committing a robbery, taking someone's life, and stealing a car, why wouldn't he at least take what was valuable? The turning point came when police found Rebecca's car. Inside the vehicle, hidden under the front passenger seat, was the murder weapon. The gun, which belonged to Larry, was in a plastic bag with 5 spent cartridges, matching the shots fired at the house. In addition, there was jewelry that Larry usually wore, a key to the gun case, and the keys to Larry's Jeep Cherokee, which had been missing. This discovery was crucial. The evidence no longer pointed to a poorly planned robbery, but to a much darker and more personal crime. With Larry's gun and items found in Rebecca's car, it was clear that she was the prime suspect. Investigators faced a complicated puzzle. Just imagine, for someone to have committed the crime, the suspect would have to make a series of nearly impossible moves. First, he would have to break into Larry and Rebecca's home, a residence that was not at all easy to break into. Then, he would have to go upstairs to the bedroom, find a gun hidden in the drawer, go back downstairs and shoot Larry. Then, the criminal would have to ransack the house, stealing valuables and even Larry's Cherokee, drive around the block and finally abandon the car before returning to the house. There, he would have to hide the gun and other stolen items in Rebecca's car. The whole plan seemed too elaborate to be true. The investigation became more complex when detectives discovered that Rebecca had life insurance policies that would pay out nearly $500,000 if anything happened to Larry. And that wasn't all. If Larry died, Rebecca would inherit his vast fortune, which could mean millions of dollars. Rebecca insisted that she had no reason to kill Larry, claiming that he was better off alive and that she would not benefit from his death. To verify Rebecca's story, investigators ran a series of tests. They collected samples of gunshot residue, hair fibers, and clothing from the night of the crime. However, gunshot residue tests revealed that there were no traces of gunpowder on Rebecca's hands. This could indicate that she had showered, washed her hands, or worn gloves. To complicate matters further, Rebecca had passed 3 polygraph, or lie detector, tests, 2 administered by the investigators themselves and 1 by an independent company. Despite these seemingly favorable results, detectives remained skeptical. The case seemed to have gone cold until an unexpected event reignited the investigation. Rebecca's house was set on fire. The investigation of the fire revealed that a fire accelerant had been used, indicating arson. This raised suspicions that Rebecca might have had something to do with the fire, or that someone had helped her. Rebecca, who was in financial trouble and desperately needed money, claimed that she had nothing to gain from the fire, as the house was in foreclosure and would not bring her any financial benefit. The fire caught the attention of investigators, who decided to re-evaluate Larry's case. And it was then that Rebecca herself, almost ironically, provided the key to solving the mystery. She called 911 reporting a domestic problem with a troubled boyfriend named Alfred Nolan. Rebecca wanted the police to remove Nolan from her home. If you are enjoying the story and want to follow more cases like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you will not miss any of our upcoming videos and will stay up to date with everything that happens in the world of mysteries and crimes. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell to receive notifications whenever we have a new video on air. Continuing. During the interrogation, Nolan made a shocking revelation. He told detectives about a fight he had with Rebecca, in which she had held a knife to his throat and threatened to take his life in the same way she had with Larry. Nolan claimed that Rebecca had scoffed at the situation, saying that no such thing had ever happened and that Larry's death had nothing to do with the knife. Rebecca described Nolan as a career criminal, trying to negotiate a plea deal with the courts to avoid a long prison sentence. Detective Michael H. acknowledged that Nolan had a history of trouble, but he pointed out that his claim could be corroborated by other witnesses. Nolan had told this story to others before the police even began investigating him. With this new information, detectives began to believe that they had enough evidence to charge Rebecca Fenton with the death of her husband, Larry. The case against Rebecca did not rest on a single piece of evidence. It was the aggregate of all the evidence that overwhelmingly showed that she was guilty. One of the most shocking points was a local TV video that showed Rebecca smiling and looking cheerful shortly after Larry's tragic death. This happened just minutes after he was shot in his own home. Rebecca's 911 call also raised suspicions, especially since crime scene photos showed that when she found Larry lying there, she did nothing to try to save him. In addition to the footage and the phone call, there were crucial documents that showed that Rebecca was set to make a fortune. If Larry died, she would receive more than $1 million in compensation, life insurance and inheritance. These documents were a big factor for investigators, as they gave Rebecca a strong financial motive for committing the crime. Another important factor was the weapon used in the crime. Detectives found the gun in Rebecca's car. The gun was hidden in a plastic bag under the passenger seat, along with spent ammunition and jewelry that Larry often wore. This was a big weight against her, as it seemed like the gun was planted there to deflect blame. More than 6 years after Larry's death, detectives called Rebecca into the police station for the last time. The investigation was nearing its conclusion, and Rebecca was stunned by the situation. She said she never imagined she would be charged with something so serious, and that the situation was a nightmare for her. However, the jury had no doubts and found her guilty, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge presiding over the case, despite the evidence and the lack of physical evidence that could contradict the accusation, firmly believed in Rebecca's guilt. He mentioned that, even with Rebecca's lies, the evidence was clear and pointed to her as responsible. However, there was one person who believed in Rebecca's innocence, Judge Andrew Tizard, a former British police officer. He was surprised to see the conviction and thought that the lack of gunshot residue and fingerprints on the gun were important details that should be considered. Tizard also questioned the value of Rebecca's smile at the crime scene, saying that smiles can often be misinterpreted. Tizard criticized the testimony of Alfred Nolan, Rebecca's boyfriend, saying that his allegations had no independent evidence and were just hearsay. He decided to go to the United States to try to help Rebecca, believing that she had been wrongly convicted. On the other hand, Rebecca's mother had a different view. She revealed that shortly before Larry's death, she had spoken to Rebecca about a man named David, whom she had met in an Alcoholics Anonymous group. She told Rebecca that she was interested in this man and that she had received many messages from him. Her mother even thought it was strange that Rebecca would be interested in someone like that, especially when she had a Prince Charming like Larry. This detail was relevant because David was present at Larry's funeral. Yes, Rebecca took her husband's life, and that is a painful truth. I did not ask her directly why she did it, because I knew I would not get an honest answer. At first, I thought that perhaps she had planned it with someone she was seeing, and that this person might have been the one who was truly responsible for the crime. The idea that Rebecca, alone, could have done something so horrible seemed hard to believe. However, when I attended the trial last year, the evidence clearly showed that Rebecca was, in fact, responsible. It was a difficult process to follow, but all the evidence pointed to her. I firmly believe that my daughter committed this crime. It is painful for me as a mother to have to admit this, but I cannot ignore the reality. I am her biological mother, and even though this is hard to accept, I cannot lie or hide my feelings. Rebecca will now face the rest of her life behind bars. The sentence she received is life in prison, without the possibility of parole. I wonder if this punishment was fair. The truth is that a person's life cannot be returned, and the pain caused can never be completely erased. But when you look back on everything that happened, it is difficult to find a definitive answer as to whether the punishment was truly fair. And so we come to the end of another video, folks. The case of Rebecca Fenton is a grim reminder of how the darkest secrets can be hidden in plain sight. If you found this story as impactful as we did, don't forget to give it a like to show your support. Your click of the like button helps bring more intriguing and important cases to our channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take the opportunity to subscribe and activate the bell. That way, you'll receive a notification every time we post a new video, full of mysteries and revelations. We'd love to hear your opinion on the Rebecca Fenton case. Leave a comment below so we can discuss and share your ideas with our community. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.